Okay, so if folks can go ahead and add their names to the notes doc, that'd be awesome. I will drop it in chat as well. Is anyone new or hasn't been to one of these before?
I am Margaret Tucker, and Justin Colanino will be joining as well.
Margaret, you want to just give us a little intro on who you are? And Margaret will be speaking later as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, my name is Margaret. I am on GitHub's policy team, and we've been doing some work with NPM on securing registries, and also collaborate a lot with Miles and Trevor, which I think you guys are familiar with. So we are going to present and share our thoughts and get feedback from you guys.
Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Justin Colanino. Hi, everybody. I'm also from GitHub's policy team. Also wear a hat over at Microsoft as an open source standards lawyer. Very happy to be here. See some familiar faces. Good to see everybody and meet everybody who I haven't met yet.
Awesome. Welcome. Thanks for coming. Yeah, just so you know, we do record all these working group sessions and post the videos online later. So for anyone that isn't here, we can share the video with them afterwards as well. Okay, we have a couple quick things on the agenda, and then I'll just hand it over to Margaret and Justin to talk to us. But first, it doesn't look like it, but is anyone from NPM here aside from Margaret and Justin? I was hoping for Miles or someone to be able to give us like a kind of recap of the announcement on NPM and SIG-Story integration. But if they're not here, maybe we won't get that. But I did want to make everyone aware that that blog post was made, and there's an RFC now with lots and lots of comments on it. And I think this proposal aligns pretty well with what some of the other repositories have already proposed or planning to propose. So I think the discussion here is really relevant for everyone in this work group. So yeah, any question or discussion on this?
It was it was interesting to see that a lot of the discussion centered around the distinction between stuff being done at the CLI and stuff being done in CI. How much is being handled by GitHub Actions versus how much is being done at the command line. And that was not a distinction I picked up immediately from the RFC. It mostly came out of further discussions that people had on different parts of it. And I'm very interested in how it evolves.
Was that between like happening inside the NPM tool or outside the NPM tool?
More that like there would be sort of stuff you do at a command line as a developer. You've got your NPM tool and you say, I want to sign this thing, versus I'm using an existing CI provider to sign on my behalf, right? I'm trusting not so much with the CLI where you trust the OIDC provider, ID provider to say, this person is authenticated by Google or GitHub or Microsoft as they are now, versus this build is authenticated, this signature is authenticated by a build process managed by GitHub or GitLab or Circle CI or what have you. And I did not pick up that distinction at first, but it's interesting that they have included it in the RFC as a compare and contrast with Ruby Gems. We spent a lot of our time scratching our heads about the CI case because it is a valid one, but we also punted it to a future RFC and focused purely on the CLI.
Any other takeaways? I haven't read all the comments on this yet. It's on my to-do list.
I haven't had a chance to take. I haven't been able to dig into that, but that sounds interesting because the human versus the machine is one of the things that I know we have to contend with on the Maven side, because we're the last mile of so many places build systems, right? So I'm interested to see if there's a proposal in there, how they're tackling that.
Cool. Anything else? Okay. Moving on to the next thing, I just wanted to also make people aware that there was a recent proposal that the TAC voted on in terms of they voted to endorse the OpenSSF2 fund. This is for some Python tooling support for the SPDX client libraries. I'm not involved in this. I actually wasn't aware of it until APAC voted on it, but just want to make people aware that like there's this thing happening where proposals are getting made and funded, and we can do some similar stuff here at the repositories as well if they're meaningful. And this is interesting to me and with my Python hat on because we'll be using this elsewhere probably. But if client library tooling is not up to snuff for your ecosystem, like it's probably a fair game here to work on something similar. Yeah, David.
Yeah, just quick note. Formally, those of you who are already familiar with the OpenSSF work can go to sleep. But formally, it's the OpenSSF governing board that decides where funding goes. But in general, they like to get a tech review from the TAC. So typically, what happens, proposal goes to TAC, and then if the governing board's already approved of the category, which happens for some areas, smaller tasks, then off you go. Otherwise, it goes up to the governing board for thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, so that hopefully kind of help the where things go in the little process there. Thanks.
Cool. Anything else about that or questions about proposals for funding?
Yeah, I was just going to add, this one is still waiting for the governing board approval. The TAC basically agreed to send it. I think there's still, I know there's still some work going on to kind of decide between the GB and the TAC, is there a certain level below which it's delegated directly to the TAC? That's an active conversation. But this proposal was specific enough. It had a vendor and all of these types of things, right? So it's if we're thinking about doing something like that as a model, I think that's a good way. It's not just an ask for money. It's a specific, we have this thing and we're going to achieve the following milestones, and we have somebody on the hook for this proposal to go do it. But there is discretionary money available. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think, yeah, your point is a good one to remind everybody that this thing exists, and so we might be able to use it if we want to.
There's also the funding that was pre-committed by contributors to the mobilization plan, so you can position yourself as track 8, I think, or 7. I don't know why I know
something
that
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, track number larger than 5, but less than 10.
Yeah.
But I'd also say it was a really good example of a shovel-ready project. Like everything was there. All it just needed is cash to be injected at one end, and that's like a bar to aspire to whenever we go up to GB for money. And for me, the one thing that I have in mind is still the thing we've discussed in the past, which is it would be super nice if there was a support desk so that we could ramp up MFA to larger cohorts than we do today, because that support burden is a killer. I don't know how you're doing in PyPI land, but I'm sure you've had at least one phone lost already.
Yeah, my inbox is on fire, basically.
Good times.
Yeah, that would be nice. I might have some news on that in the future. Nothing super concrete right now, but there's some promising stuff happening there.
It's good to hear.
Okay, cool. Thanks for David for filling us in on that process, and Brian for giving us some more background. Anything else there? Okay, Sterling, you want to chat about the glossary?
Sure. Nothing too long, I think. I sent an email just a few minutes ago with a link to the glossary. If you're in a different ecosystem, if you can take a look at it, fill in what you can, even a sentence or saying, I don't know what this is, or we don't use this word, or whatever, would be super helpful. I think if I don't get much more traction on it by the next time we meet, I might just invoke Cunningham's law and like just fill it in the way I think it is in those ecosystems, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. But yeah, if you have any time that you can spend on it and fill in some things, that would be really helpful.
Do you want to maybe call out some specific folks that you might want to, like, I think I'm probably one of them, that you'd like to fill in the spots in here?
Yeah, I know you're involved in Python, but I don't know the names of good names for other people or other ecosystems.
I can take a shot at
Sure.
assigning voluntoling some people. So.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Well, we're about 15 minutes in. So Margaret, Justin, happy to turn over to you essentially the rest of the meeting. We can talk to us as much as you'd like, then maybe save some time at the end for questions from us as well.
All right,
you want to try and
good.
share screens?
Yeah, let's see.
And thanks for having us here. I mean, I think I hope we're not talking at you too much, and hopefully this becomes more of a conversation, throughout. So.
Awesome. That's good.
Yeah, we can jump into it. I'm Margaret. I work specifically on platform policy, which is why I'm engaged in this effort. And we're kind of trying to use some of the things that we've worked on when it comes to platform and informing the idea of principles for developer ecosystems.
And I'm Justin. As I mentioned before, I wear a hat at GitHub, focused on developer policy, and I'm also a dog owner, if you heard that that barking, and also a lawyer on the Microsoft side, doing open source. I've been an open source lawyer for about 12 years now. Most of my practice is around open source.
Awesome. So I guess I can get into it. So essentially what we're thinking about is how we can take the developer first approach to content moderation and expand that into how we respond at NPM, possibly NuGet, and other package registries. And so getting into what GitHub does, we follow the Santa Clara principles and are kind of engaged in these sort of content moderation type discussions. And so key principles of that is putting developers at the center of moderating their own projects, fair, empathetic, and transparent moderation, and optimizing for code collaboration. And we've worked on this for a long time. And I guess the question is, what is the developer first ethos for package ecosystem? So how can you center the developer in a package ecosystem? And if we were to establish a set of, say, principles or, guiding like principles for governance, what would they say?
Mr. Wheeler, I see your hand up. Dr. Wheeler, excuse me.
Are these slides posted somewhere, or is there a URL?
So that's actually, we can get to that, but we were wondering if we should share these or a document that we can comment on, but we can talk about that at the end. Okay. We're open to any way that you guys want to provide us feedback once we get through them and get into the questions.
Thanks.
And so, so I think you're thinking about a platform like GitHub is very different than a package registry, and they have unique features and concerns. And so thinking about developing governance principles for a registry, what does align and what needs to be, unique and considered for this type of ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, and in particular, I think the big distinction, right, is GitHub, when you're doing code collaboration there, it really is kind of code at rest, right? Where, it can't be activated with a push of a button. And there's this principle in law that I always come back to, which actually kind of draws an interesting line here between registries and kind of, the source code itself, is that, First Amendment, like free speech in the United States, it applies to code, and it applies to both, source code and, let's say, kind of compiled or minified or whatever, your ecosystem does with it. It applies to that code too, because someone can kind of decompile it or, understand and read it. But courts have said, and this goes back to the DCSS case, which people might remember, which is the encryption on DVDs. And what courts draw a distinction between source code, which you need to do something further to it in order to activate it and have it perform a function in the world. And object code, or code that just, if you press a button, it does something, right? There's kind of less learning that you get, or less reason to learn when it's just kind of automated into your system. And package registries have that code in flight situation where you press a button. The idea is that you don't necessarily want to change the package coming in. In fact, like, you want that kind of stable runtime environment for the code that you're writing provided to you by the package registry, which is different than on GitHub, where you're actually trying to kind of improve the code itself and understand what it does. I'm not saying that you can't use a package registry to find and change and look at the code, but I think the general principle is that you want to use it to develop your software quickly and on top of what you're up to.
Yeah, and so with that, I think the unique element means that there are unique roles and unique issues that come to package registries. And so we identified these two as like kind of key governance questions. So what is the role of registries when it comes to publishing malware on registry, or known security vulnerabilities? When does the registry get involved, and when is it the responsibility of the maintainer, and when does it not fall to the registry or the maintainer to intervene? So here we go. Oh, Justin, your trilogy or trinity.
Yeah. So there really is. I mean, when you think about it, or maybe this is not news to anybody here, but there are basically three actors. When you're thinking about these issues about kind of like what's the right way to secure and maintain that platform, that registry for developers, right? One is, the user, right? When a user comes to a registry, like, what they want is their code to work. They don't want, surprise takedowns that break changes in their system. They don't want, they want, the code that they build using that package ecosystem to run well and be stable. And, they want to be able to get upgrades and notified of potential upgrades as they go. But really what they're looking for is a secure, reliable, safe place to build code on top of, right? Maintainers, they have a little bit of a, they're often users as well, but they're also thinking, their real kind of sweat has been put into maintaining that package over time. And what they're really, thinking about is, this is my package. I'm expressing myself in various ways. I'm supporting, doing my part to uphold, this great ecosystem that's in here by maintaining one or more packages. And my voice matters in this ecosystem and in this community as well. And so packages can be a way of expressing yourself and kind of participating in that system. And we want to give them kind of free reign for how to govern their projects and bring it in various ways. And then finally, there's the registry. And what the registry is trying to do is make sure that maintainers have a great tooling and good place to develop and put stuff on their registry, and that users are well supported in that ecosystem. And so we need to think about balancing these three interests at any point when we're developing principles for like how are we going to handle incidents on the registry, and when's the right time to take something down. If you take something down too quickly, you're breaking a lot of users or upsetting a lot of maintainers. And so you need to do it in a really principled fashion so that people's builds aren't broken, maintainers stay happy, and you're not interfering with their maintainership process too much, because if you're doing that, then why would they be hosting on your platform at all? And do you crush that ecosystem?
Awesome. And so going into that, we've kind of thought about and talked to NPM and NuGet to start. And, you guys are the next step of, getting feedback on this, but trying to think about these different issues of governance, moderation, different incentives and goals. And then it's kind of congeal them into 5 sort of draft principles for package registries. And so when we say draft, we really mean draft. This has gone through a lot of iterations, and we're hoping that your feedback will, bring it into a next level. But essentially, these are 5 principles. They're very overarching. They're non-specific, but they can generally guide a discussion and show a commitment that registries can share when it comes to moderation decisions. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize A, the draft nature, but B, having consensus from the registries on this, I think would be really helpful. Consensus and input from both users and maintainers, and an opportunity for input from both users and maintainers if we kind of like widen this out. And the reason for that is that I think we should all like the whole ecosystem has concerns around this, right? The whole ecosystem wants security. The whole ecosystem wants to express itself. The whole ecosystem wants to, make itself better. And so, recognizing that and standing this up. The other thing I want to say about, these principles, I think of them as kind of guideposts. One of my law professors in law school said everything in law comes down to 2 different tests. There's either a bright line rule or a mushy standard. Bright line rules are easy and great and awesome to do. If you try to have only bright line rules in this space, I think you're going to run into problems very quickly, because there's always going to be a kind of what about new edge case. And so having these as kind of guideposts, or, these are the factors we consider when we make a decision, I think is important. So some of them might be conflicting or potentially overlapping.
Yeah, and we can get into the actual text, but I should just say, this is, again, very much draft, but we're trying to think about, you guys all work on the front lines with this. So how do you think these can actually be operationalized? They're mushy, but what do they mean in real life? And so kind of keeping an idea when we pass them on for your feedback, obviously they're mushy, but they have to mean something tangible. And so that's kind of the thing that we're trying to get at. Hold on, it's not letting me. Oh, okay, now I'm clicking. So the first one is trust comes first. And this one is really trying to get at the expectations of the ecosystem, that the ecosystem should be consistent, reliable. And then with that, we have that the ecosystem should be able to provide resources that enable developers to make informed decisions about dependencies, and also avoid breaking developer workflows whenever possible. So those are the kind of the general ones with trust, that the code is going to work and people can generally understand what they're getting into when they use it.
Right, and this really is for in a lot of ways, like the user trust is really important, because you want that stable base when you're developing your application.
Yeah, and then our next one, this one is really the kind of classic platform one of transparent and consistent policies. So showing that there are clear expectations for the role of registry and role of the maintainer, and then having those rules be transparent, enforcement be transparent, and having an option for appeals. And I would say this is borrowed pretty closely from Santa Clara principles and how we do moderation on GitHub. But I think that while this is relatively vague, you can definitely see how this would be operationalized. And we could talk about the issues of, are all package registries able to provide these, different options for appeal, and what are the, issues with that? Let's go to the third one.
And so, with this one, I think there's kind of like a bright line almost test here, right? Which is that, when you're detecting kind of active malware, and what's the line between malware? I mean, maybe there's not a bright line, but what's the line between like malware and a bug is an important kind of question. I think, there's an intent issue there that you might need to consider, but, like having a zero tolerance policy for, malware, I think is I think probably in everybody's best interest, both users and other maintainers, right? Where the idea is that you want to ensure that stable, reliable base that people can build on top of. And if people are actively, trying to break that, it compromises the trust across the entire ecosystem. So there should be proactive measures by the platform against that, and give tools to identify the situation where that occurs.
Yeah, I think this principle was originally malware is bad, and then we kind of got a little bit more nuanced with it, but that's the general sentiment. And then, yeah.
Actually, can I make a comment on the last slide?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so give developer the tools. I mean, I'm not, first of all, I agree, malware bad. Hopefully we can all agree on that. Yeah, I'm sure there's some nuance there, but on that last bullet, give developer the tools. I'd like to go a little further because, I mean, developers already have tools. I really want to make it so that developers get a lot of information, get a lot by default. In other words, if you you add a package and it has a known vulnerability, I don't want it to be possible for a developer to find out. I want it to be pretty obvious. The developer doesn't have to do anything extra to the extent that we can enable it. Secure by default and trying to make it so they don't have to go out of their way to find out information. I'm not sure how to word this, but I just, I'm not opposed, as I said, to giving tools, but as much as we can, ease and by default, I think is a critical part of that.
Ease and by default. No, I hear you. And also I think that, in general, like giving tools is maybe a little bit too passive or kind of passing on responsibility. So we can think about how to word that. Thank you, David. Okay, should we move to the next one?
I think we have another hand up.
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to build quickly on what David said. One thing about a lot of tools is that they're being run unattended. They're running in an automated environment. And generally speaking, a warning or an informational statement just won't be seen. It's important to remember that like 99% of executions are unattended. And the way you draw their attention is you break. Which goes to what David was saying, is it's like you've got to make it default to fail secure.
Yeah, I'm always hesitant to break the build, although I do appreciate the problem of warnings are hidden. Maybe there's a way to meet in the middle where we can make warnings visible. I do agree with the problem. I fear the solution.
And what I love about this is exactly the kind of like guidepost problem, right? Consistency and reliability are paramount, but so is, but in breaking builds kind of interferes with that. But then there's also the fact that, that breaking builds increases security. I see another hand.
Yeah, Breaking Builds, the next TV show from, anyway, I agree with both Jack and David here in the sense that, ultimately we should probably end up in breaking by default. But I think there's room for transitioning slowly, warning, finally leading to errors. More along the lines of what David was trying to say.
I will observe that actually for the best practices badge, we actually intentionally break builds for known vulnerabilities. One of our steps is break build if known dependency, known vulnerability and dependencies. And then we can override if in fact, there's no good solution. That's an approach I'm not sure everybody will, actually, I'm sure not everyone will want to take that. But it is something that people could choose. And I think this is more of a conversation, but we need to have that conversation.
Yeah, and I think that this last bullet, which is kind of operationalized in like a text document that we'll share out also. Maybe we want to make that stronger, and if there is a commitment by all the registries here, which are the major ones, to do that and want to make that commitment, that would be an interesting something that comes out of this. I mean, the goal here is for for everybody to kind of, agree on those principles, get user input. I mean, if users want that, and maintainers want that, that's another step in the right direction, and giving people the opportunity to comment around that, I think would be really interesting, and a good way to have that conversation, perhaps.
Are there any other questions, or should we go through the rest? Okay, sounds good. All right, Justin, do you want to go on this one?
Sure. And then so this is really kind of putting the maintainer hat on a little bit more, right? Which is the registry shouldn't be in the business of the day-to-day package maintenance issues across their entire ecosystem. If they are, then that, I think, would be considered by a lot of maintainers to be a little bit of overreach. So you could imagine some kind of like obscure bug comes into developers queue, and they're kind of like, yeah, won't fix, or that's such an edge case that it's not worth doing at all, and won't fix, or won't support over time. And so they need to be enabled to do that and make decisions around their own packages, and you have to assume positive intent in those areas. And so whenever there is an enforcement action, you need to be kind of gracious to the package maintainer, and apply your measures like thoughtfully and carefully, so that you're not kind of overstepping where that is. And as I've said before, there is kind of this intent issue there, right? Which is like, what is a security vulnerability bug on the maintainer such that you want to kind of like delist their, or the rise level of delisting their package or something, right? And when is it malware where you like automatically delist, right? And so there's maybe a range there, or something like that. But what this is setting out is like, we're not, the registry isn't trying to become the overlord of all maintainers, and drive get too involved in the day-to-day maintenance of particular packages. Go ahead, David.
In many ways, this harkens back to the whole making your policies clear, right? So, NPM didn't, but now has a policy of after a certain amount of time, they won't delete a package, except for malware. I hear LeftPad had something to do with that. So, so basically, normally maintainers can do things, but if there's an exception, you would hope that that would be a clearly explained exception for the other point. Is that where you're leading?
Right. Yep.
Yeah, and I think that the carefully is operative there, both understanding dependencies and, the possible unintended consequences for takedowns, as well as the potential risk for anything. All right, and then I think this is our last one. So always innovate, great thing to say. And in general, this is, I would say, a squishy guidepost saying that things are constantly changing, and that while registries should take advantage of existing tools, but also update best practices. And that also includes the policies. So policies are living documents that should change with the ecosystem and input from the community. And so I guess that kind of goes into the why we need this and what we're thinking of doing for it. So, when we say policies should be continually like updating, that includes these principles. So we would love your feedback. If you think that this is something that could be useful, how you think it would work in practice. We're imagining that agreeing on these principles with leaders in the package registry ecosystem would allow people to both share resources and strategies, increase trust in package registry moderation decisions. We are, affirming these principles. We're committed to these principles. This is why we made this decision. And there's a bit of a guidepost that you can refer to that's outside of the day-to-day scram. And then having shared principles for responding to incidents. So, you don't need to go alone. Everyone can share this, and potentially it would make it easier for registries to have moderation decisions that aren't necessarily in isolation. They can, build off of each other's decisions.
and I also think I think all of those things together, create a smoother ecosystem for everyone, right? I mean, having a place to kind of comment at the high level for people, and commit to things at a high level for both maintainers, users, and registries, to kind of say, like, this is kind of the social contract that we all should have, regardless of the language or technology, and then kind of get into the details, at the registry specific area, I think is very helpful to kind of drive that conversation and get across all developers, rather than cabining things off in different areas. Dr. Wheeler.
Yeah. You'd earlier talked about, well, what's the goal, and basically trying to deal with malware and known vulnerabilities. I think it's often helpful to answer the question, hey, what are you overall trying to accomplish? And I think countering malware, helping people prevent known vulnerabilities isn't bad, but I would divide up the malware into two categories. It's the intentional from the actual developer, and it's an attacker taking over an account. And the reason I would split that up is because I think there's different countermeasures for different circles. Obviously, things like 2FA can really help counter the account takeovers and some things like that, and some of the other issues. And signatures can help. That doesn't help, obviously, for the here I am me, and here's your malware. So I think it's important to split, because I think that as you keep going down this road of principles and so on, all those cases are going to be important.
So I consider like intention and identity.
Well, somebody has an intention if it's malware, but so I guess it's malware. Malware has two kinds.
I'd say inside a threat and outside a threat, using repurposing that.
Yeah.
That's something I hadn't thought through before, really, and I wonder if these principles could be shaped in some way to kind of hit that, right, where like we kind of say, like, give people tools for securing that. Maybe there's something around that kind of like identity protection that you'd want to put in maybe the empowerment section or something like that.
It's sort of interesting. When I've been involved in MFA for Ruby, my thinking has been primarily about the users. It's happy that it protects the accounts of the maintainers, but I'm doing that, instrumentally to achieve the protection of the end consumers. And that's one thing that I think is a currently emerging tension for a lot of us, which is that some of the time the registries or the repositories are going to be asking maintainers to do something novel, to do something they haven't had to do before, such as MFA or signing, being the two big ones. And the reason that you do this is because you're sort of weighing up the costs and benefits to each of those two constituencies, and coming down that the benefits for the end users is outweighing the cost to the maintainers. But there is a cost, and if you're in a maintainer bucket, you might see it very differently. You just see it as an imposition with nothing for you. Nothing's in it for you. So I guess what I'm trying to drive at is that another way of slicing through this is, what does the registry owe the maintainer, and what does the registry owe the end user? And in particular, when those interests conflict, what does the registry propose to do? Or, to whom does the privilege accrue to have their interests favored?
And that we've really, I think that's why the trust comes first, is first, right? Which is that, like, the stability of the ecosystem is really what matters. And I think that you need to take all three of those things into consideration. But But as you're balancing, like stability is the most important thing, both for, takedowns and for, as you say, maybe putting, guideposts and restrictions on maintainers. I mean, one other, area that I think is really interesting around this is, package registries and like, where's the source for the executable, right? Like what you really want is a commit to the source that built the package. And believe me, in my role as thinking about this from a lawyer perspective, sometimes that's not there, and I understand why it's not, because it's hard to do at scale and make everybody do it. And you want more packages, and so you want to ease things up on maintainers, but not knowing that has license implications, also has security implications. It'd be great to have that as a another thing that people would do, but you don't want to throw too much burden on everybody. Sorry, Dr. Wheeler.
Okay. Although when people use my title a lot, it makes me suspect that what am I getting set up for now? Yeah,
I'm just being formal because we're being recorded.
I see. Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I'm wondering if there's a sixth one about providing information necessary to make good decisions. I mean, you could argue that that's part of that transparent policy, but I think it's also the, it's not just the policies, but the information. Yeah. So I'm wondering. So I think in at least some of these cases, I think there's trade-offs. And in that case, probably there's going to be transparent and consistent policies is going to be key. I'll give you some specific ones that I'm thinking of. It would be awesome if repositories searched for, did various kinds of analysis to look for malware and yank it when it's clearly malware. It would also be awesome if package registries, package repositories would attempt to rebuild the package to see if they can reproduce it, and then tell developers either, yes, I can reproduce it, I know this is from the source, or no, I can't reproduce it, I don't know if this is from that source. The good news for the end users is that gives them more information to work with. The bad news is more dependable. The bad news is that's a lot to ask. And, PyPI might be able to do that because, a lot of people care about Python, and, it has a large but not crazy large number of packages. I don't know how to do that with NPM. That has a even larger number of packages. And then there's like the common list package registry. That is a lot less activity, and I'll bet that very, very few people are going to sign up to do malware work on that. So there's, I think different registries are going to have different answers, but as long as they answer it, here is our answer for this registry, I think that's going to help a lot.
Right, and that kind of like differences between different registries is one of the reasons we're trying to keep it this super high level, right? Like broad top level commitments that you'd want to make, regardless of the ecosystem, regardless of your user base or maintainer base, just kind of thinking about those things more in the abstract rather than, diving down and saying, we will make sure that, we commit to the top, 25 packages on our registry being, the most secure packages ever made, that kind of thing. We really need to kind of have guideposts and guiding lights here.
Yeah, but I think there is a sixth one about providing data at least to the users, the recipients. What in your actor model? Which one? Yeah, users. Providing the information to the users so that they can make reasonable decisions. Not that we're going to make the decisions for them, and not that we can provide all data. We mean if I was a registry, but at least some of that. It's not just transparent policy. It's transparent and consistent data for users for decision. I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, I think we had that point on, I forget which one it was, maybe trust comes first, but it was a last bullet in one of them that's tools basically, and committing to provide, it says secure the supply chain, give developers tools to identify vulnerabilities in their stack. And I think there's the, I think there's an analog to that, which is for a lot of these, questions of, are you really going to ask the maintainer to do one more thing, right? It's kind of like, if you can make it seamless and the tools easier for doing it, or like automatic, you could imagine integration with GitHub or GitLabs or whatever your code hosting is, where kind of auto tags as you publish up or something, should be a really nice feature that would drive some of that behavior that you want with it, and get it for free essentially. So.
Yeah, you might want to reword some of this so your user list of actors is kept consistent through here. Like when you say developers, I assume what you mean is users of the. Okay.
Yeah, I think we do. Thank you.
And I think if I was to rephrase it, one thing I would include is to say that it's less about the tools per se, it's more about the data required to decide on policy, to make policy decisions. Is a lot of the way how I've seen it framed.
I think it's more than policy decisions, but I would agree with that. I mean, we want to help users make the decisions, not just get the package, but before they do it, help them make decisions. Yeah. At least the data that you have, and ideally focus on trying to get them some data so that they can, make better decisions.
I'm muted, but yeah, we'll definitely integrate that. I think that we can tweak the existing policies to incorporate that feedback. Is there anything else on, I guess, any of the past 5 that anyone thinks that we might want to rework before we pass them on to you for like a more thorough review and feedback period?
I know I've talked a lot, so someone else should go. Just look hopefully at people.
I've also talked more than some others, so.
Hearing nothing, maybe the right thing is like, what's the best way to collaborate would be the kind of, going forward. I mean, this is, the feedback's been awesome in this call. But it might be nice to maybe stand up a Google Doc, to share these slides out, which really are reflective of a one pager. Oh, sorry, Brian.
Yeah, you might have missed this before, and or you might have said this before, and I missed it. But how are you expecting this to be achieved? Because part of it is you're in this group anyway. You're speaking to most of the package registries. So if we all agree, where do you go from here, right? Because you're speaking to, I think, we're your target audience in some way, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think the end goal is to have this group agree, or this group, or this group, the group of package managers that are here, and maybe others, if you know others that would be interested in participating, kind of agree on this set, or a set of principles, right? Like get a document together, and then I think stand it up somewhere and make an announcement and say, hey, maintainers, users, on these ecosystems, like, here are the principles we're thinking about adopting for how we're going to think about, dealing with this stuff moving forward. We'd love, open it up for comments. What should these principles be? And then, close it down at some point, and everybody sign it, and make sure
a manifesto almost. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. It reminds me, I'll have to dig this up. It was probably 5 or 6 years ago now. And our Nexus repo team started drafting a thing that was titled something like, so you want to create a new format. And the principles, rule number 1 was like, please don't. There's enough of them. But then if you really need to, we started listing things that, not quite these principles, but principles at a different level. It might be worth, if I can dredge that up, and maybe we could kick that around here. Could be a corollary to that.
Yeah, that would be great. And then just a quick question. Would a Google Doc be the best way for everyone to review and collaborate on this? Or like, should we put it in a
Emphatically,
repo?
yes.
Easy way.
Yeah.
Google Doc.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds great. And I'm assuming this mailing list is the right one to share it with.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You could drop it in the agenda, probably would be the easiest way for us to find it. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
I will observe that typically what happens in OpenSSF is there's a Google Doc, you abuse it and eventually convert it over to GitHub Markdown so that more care as it starts solidifying, we can make more careful tracking. But the Google Doc makes it easier to get started. But it sounds like the goal is really an output from this group saying, hey, these repositories agree on these principles. And obviously somebody else doesn't have to agree, but that will, I think, have a big influence on any other registry.
Right, exactly. And again, standing up for a public comment period, did we get it right? I think is really great too, because then, I think, when moderation decision comes down and, you're doing it, reflecting back on that, this is kind of the way that we're balancing this trilogy of package, user, maintainer is a helpful, framework. And then, comment over here too, if you don't like our decisions, right?
Yeah, and I will say, the comments that you provide can be on the text specifically, but also if you have thoughts on the ambiguities of operationalizing it, those sort of things, we're trying to collect that so we can have a broader idea of, just what this would mean for NPM and other registries. So it doesn't just have to be about the text, it can just be about the issues in general.
I just want to note, Shashank brought up a time check a few minutes ago, and I wanted to make sure you got a chance to talk about the Asia Pacific timing. I think possibly because it is more Pacific than Asia friendly.
As most of the Pacific Ocean.
Hi.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't see that on the agenda. Trishank, you want to jump in?
Oh, no, don't worry about it. I hated to be that guy, but thanks, Jack. Yes, I did want to raise this important point, is that I'm worried that we're accidentally leaving some people out, and we may be missing them just because the timing is not right. This is something I think we should think seriously about. Yeah, I don't know how we would solve this problem, and I don't think we have enough time to solve it now, but something that I think is worth doing is maybe sending out a survey to the repo communities and see what people think. We may be missing a demand here. I don't know. What does everyone else think? Timing is always hard. I know it's a difficult problem.
Yeah, we're trying. I think logistically it might be challenging as well, because I don't think we have Jacques and I unfortunately are both in the same time zone, so we don't have a chair if this would occur at a later time. Like, that's sort of getting into my bedtime. So I think we could try and shift it like a little bit later. I don't know if that might be helpful.
Yeah, I could live with shifting an hour and doing alternate chairs.
Okay, yeah, we could do that. Do we want to try and shift much later and try and find like a APAC based person to run the meeting then, or is that too much?
Again, sorry, I'm not trying to force any conclusions here. I'm just saying maybe something that before we try to even do anything is see whether there's a demand, and then we can try to optimize for it.
Yeah, it's a fair question. I just do we know, are there ecosystems not represented that would be because they're in APAC?
So we did do a poll when we originally set this meeting time and split this into a APAC friendly and EMEA friendly time zones. This was the time that was selected by the people that responded to the poll. It's possible that there's folks that we missed, but I'll raise it in the Slack channel and see if we're missing anyone, and also send an email out about that. So thanks, Trishank, for raising that.
Great. No, thanks. I appreciate the consideration.
Yeah, this came up for me while I was in Australia. I was in Western Australia, which is on a time zone that's either the same or 1 hour offset from most of East Asia. And I had to come to the last one of these. It was 6 a.m. I think for me.
I know the feeling. It used to be 6 a.m. for me too.
Right. Yeah. Same time zone as like Kuala Lumpur and
right.
Singapore and stuff. So.
Thanks for raising that. Anything else in our last couple of minutes?
I guess we'll just say thanks again, and we'll plan to put the principles in the agenda document in the next couple of days once we get them cleaned up and ready to pass on. So thank you all for your feedback.
Cool.
Thanks for
yeah,
coming.
Margaret, Justin, thanks so much for coming. Really appreciate you sharing everything with us. And I didn't chime in too much, but it's all very exciting to me. So I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Glad to hear.
Anything else?
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening, day, whatever it might be. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.